Hello, welcome. So this
Hello,
is
hello.
the first ISV Forum video, and Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So since this is the very first one, we'll do some proper introductions. So I'm Andre. I'm in the ISV Forum team, and what we're going to do is talk about anything Epic Change ISV partner related. And we're starting off with Gearset, who recently, they've been around for a long time. They're quite well known in the ecosystem, and also the community. And now recently also joined the App Exchange. Andrew, you'll be talking us through who's Gearset, but I'll talk a little bit more about ISV Forum, because who are we for? Who should be listening to this? Who should be watching this video? For anyone like administrators, consultants, also SI partners, architects, especially architects who are interested in finding the right tools, finding the right solutions for your customers, or of course, if you're an internal admin or architect for your company. And yeah, the ISV Forum will be showing you a lot of different apps, different solutions, and these unboxing videos, one by one, will unbox each solution in the App Exchange. And let's start with Gearset. So Andrew, thank you, and yeah, I'd love to know a bit more about yourself. Who are you?
Yeah,
Who's Gearset?
absolutely. Well, thanks again, Andre, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And like you said, my name's Andrew. I'm a sales engineer at Gearset. So really just helping customers, prospects of Gearset that are interested in exploring what the tool can offer, really more from that technical perspective. So excited to be here today to talk a little bit about Gearset and what we got going on, and even some things that are coming in the future. So.
Sounds good. Thank you. What is Gearset? And of course, especially with the unboxing videos, I forgot to tell
Yeah.
that. I'm not just interested in the software, also the company and behind it. Sort of, let's say the origin story. Who and what is behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start by just talking a little bit about what Gearset is. So, Gearset is an all-in-one Salesforce DevOps platform. So, what that really means is solutions for folks that use Salesforce related to metadata, deployments, and backup, and also related to data features. So, data backup, data archiving, and things like data deployments or data seeding. So, that's a little bit about what Gearset is. But to your point about the story of Gearset, I can kind of drill into a little bit of kind of where we started. And so that was in 2015 by a group of developers from our parent company, Redgate, that decided that Salesforce needed some additional solutions to help folks with development and specifically deployment. So that's kind of the original story. And here we are 10 years later doing this unboxing video.
What's a typical user of Gearset, of the software?
So the typical people that are going to be using Gearset is starting with individual teams. Now, individual teams, this is a wide range. So it's the teams with one or two declarative admins, all the way to teams in the hundreds of developers and admins with a complex makeup of those teams. So a large kind of range of folks would fit into that first category of individual teams. We then would move over to consultancies. So used across a number of client projects. So folks that come to us from these groups typically have to manage a lot of parallel projects that are going on. And really the focus for them around Gearset is broken down into, I guess you call it, 4 different categories. And so ease of setup, being able to get up and running on Gearset quickly to help manage those projects, accelerating information gathering, which is really what we're going to see with one of the parts of our video that we're going to be getting to here in a minute, leading clients towards DevOps maturity. So being able to leave behind some ways of working for the clients that they serve. And then finally, the built-in insurance policy, as we like to call it, with features like data backup and data archiving.
Of course, all these features exist now. I've known Gearset for quite a few years now, and of course I know of the let's say the metadata comparison and deploy. But is that also one of the main reasons why Gearset actually started. Sort of, which problem does it fix, or which solution does it provide in
Yeah.
the core?
Yeah, it's a great call out, and I think we're going to see compare and deploy as we get in. But you're right to think that that is the start, and it became a problem worth solving of visibility. So being able to kind of understand what you're actually deploying when it's time to do so. And in addition to that, it's got features that are baked into it that allow teams to understand the full breadth of dependencies, and see some of these things in action before they actually send it over. But you're absolutely right to bring it back towards really the beginning. And that's what we started with as an alternative to some of the Salesforce native features that are offered. These group of developers found that this way of doing things was going to be a lot more conducive to accurate deployments and less issues in doing so.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Of course, I'm a little bit prepared, so I went to the Gearset website. Is this also where I get access to the app, or do I have to install a plugin?
Yeah, it's another great question there. So Gearset is a web-based platform, which means that we are off-platform, meaning that there's going to be no downloading, installing of Gearset. Instead, we're logging in via here. And in the top right corner is where you can actually log into the tool. But it's important to call out that a lot of other tools are not web facing, or really what you'd consider SaaS. Gearset is certainly in that bucket.
For you to talk me through, because yes, to be very honest, I have used Gearset before, but I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
So if you could just quickly walk me through a few of the things.
Yeah, let's do just that. So why don't you start by just clicking on return to app there in the top right corner. And when we actually get into the platform, you're going to see that it starts from the feature that we're going to begin with today, which is compare and deploy. Now, compare and deploy, really to provide a definition, is a way of being able to compare metadata between a source and a target location, which is why here on the screen you see source and target. And then ultimately that wraps up with a deployment. So it's really that two-step process. And, I mentioned metadata, but it's also going to be things like CPQ data. It's going to be things like data revolving around Salesforce industries and a few other kind of design solutions.
How about we click through, do a comparison, and
Yeah.
talk
Yeah,
me through
let's do
that?
it. Let's do it. So it's going to start with our source. And when we talk about source location, really we can think about that where you've built something that needs to be deployed. And so as our source here, why don't we use the dev sandbox that we see as a connection here? And we'll just use dev one for the sake of today. And then when we think about the target, so the other side of this, that's really going to be where we're ultimately going to be sending that metadata, CPQ data, or industries data. So as your target, Andre, why don't you go ahead and include there the UAT org?
All right.
The last piece of this puzzle is, of course, answering the question of what are we actually comparing in terms of specifics. And that's really down there in the comparison filter that you see towards the bottom of the screen. Now, I've built out a little bit of a pre-filter here for us today so that we can see some very commonly used metadata. But that is really the last piece of this kind of initial configuration puzzle. So from this point in time is when we can really dive in and take a look at what these results look like.
Click compare now, and then it does its thing. So this is what the result would look like. So there's a lot of things on the screen.
Yeah.
Where do I click?
Yeah, it's a great first question. And before you start clicking around, why don't I just kind of orient the audience a little bit to what it is that we're seeing? And it starts up in the top with our table. So you see our table, you can scroll up and down there a bit. What this table is going to show us is all of the metadata or CPQ or industries data components that fall into one of our filtered for metadata types. So on the left side of your screen, you see all those metadata types that we're actually taking a look at here in this comparison, things ranging all the way from an Apex class down to our custom objects, including fields. As you get a little bit lower, we're going to see things like layouts and flows. And so our table gives us that rendition of the actual metadata that's being pulled in, so we can see those one by one. We also see the bottom area there, which is our XML viewer pane, as we like to call it. And so down here is where we can see some of the differences between our source on the left. As you see, we got dev1 highlighted there. And then on the right is going to be the state of this component in our target, our UAT instance. Now, connecting the two really starts in that far right column, which we see as difference type. So part of these comparisons is helping us to determine where our components exist. And that difference type helps us to start to understand that. So Andre, why don't you go ahead and click into that new tab for me along the top. Our new items represent components that exist today in our dev sandbox, but don't yet exist today in our target UAT org. Heading over to our change tab then, Andre, we can see our changed components. So these are things that exist today in our source, our dev1 instance, and our target in UAT. And I'm glad that you started here on a flow, because why don't we take a look at a little bit of how that is shown. You're going to see within Gearset, there are multiple different metadata types where we've customized views and looks that help our customers to not always be just viewing raw XML, and instead being viewing, in this case, something that's a little bit more what we're used to with our flow builder. And so as you get to the middle of that, Andre, you can kind of zoom out a little bit from there, and we'll be able to see that full flow. Now, this is a super basic one, of course, but this is just intended to help us to visualize this thing like we are used to when we build it. Now, the other thing to call out here is the window on the left side of this, where we see the yellow circle and the green circle exactly. This is going to help us as you click into there to really be able to put under a microscope any of the components that have had changes, like in this case, or things that are brand new, like in the case of the one below it. And so this helps us to just visualize, like I said, that flow in this case in a little bit easier to digest manner. Now, as we get and wrap this conversation up, let's head up to that deleted tab towards the top. This is really going to be then the inverse of those new components. So this is going to be things that do not exist in our source dev, but do exist in that target UAT. And the use case here would often be that, hey, if we need to ship or deploy a destructive change, this is the tab in which we're able to do that. So hopefully that provides, Andre, just a little bit of an overview of what it is that we're seeing here with our comparisons.
Yeah, it looks like a good overview, especially the flow. I hadn't seen that before. Mm-hmm. That would help people like myself, not super technical. That would help a lot.
Yeah. Sure. Now, before we get too far in, what I'd also love to show you here, Andre, why don't you go back over to that new tab for me? Now, we didn't break down this in much more detail, but as we maybe zoom in just a little bit closer, we see that we have all of our columns. Now, you can always filter or sort any of our columns here. But what I really wanted to kind of highlight, and Andre, do me a huge favor, and let's go ahead and find our discount percentage custom field. So you can go ahead and type it right in there. Yeah. So why don't you see it kind of there in the middle, and that's perfect. Yeah. So why don't we click on that checkbox there next to it. And then up in the top left, you see where it says selected items, where it says one item. Go ahead and click on that for me. And we'll go ahead and clear out our search bar in the top right where you've got discount percent typed in there. And let's kind of break this down. So if we can imagine just really quickly for the sake of an example, we've got a custom field here that we've built brand new, but the power of Gearset extends past just this ability of being able to view it in a table and view it in below in our viewer. It's also going to help us with dependency management. So why don't you go ahead and click on that arrow that's sitting to the left of the name of our component there, and we can just break down a little bit of what we're seeing. So the first dropdown is going to be depends on. So this is going to show us anything that our component, in this case a field, really depends on. So Andre, if you drop that arrow next to that depends on down, we'll see that Gearset's going to show us here any of those direct dependencies that we know we have to include for this to be a successful deployment. We then go on to the used by. So Andre, I'll have you click into that used by. As the name suggests, this is really going to be any component that our field discount percentage is used by. And so we can see a couple things here. We see we've got an approval process. We see we've got a layout. Why don't you go ahead and just click on that layout, the name of it for me, just that account. Yeah, there you go. We'll see that updated rendering of the actual viewer. And like I said earlier, it's not just going to be flows that we have these views for. Layout's another example of metadata type that we provide these a little bit more org style views, where we, in this case with the layout, we see them in the source and the target. In addition, we also see that Gearset's going to let us pick and choose which things we would like to add to that layout instead of having to take everything and deploy it all over. So what this really allows us to do is get granular enough that if there's multiple of us working in this sandbox, I avoid colliding with my colleagues. And so really, I wanted to highlight that. And then the final thing that I think is worth calling out here is the profiles and the permissions aspect of these dependency trees, where Gearset does handle these a little bit differently too than to a lot of other tools, where you might expect in other tools when you want to include something as granular as a field level security or field permissions related to those permission sets, you're having to take that whole file and deploy it over. Well, just like with our layouts, that can create a reality where we're overwriting our colleagues, maybe a little bit more than we'd like. So by clicking on one of the actual items here in our dropdown under profiles and permissions, just like you did with the layout, Andre, we can actually see that this is just going to be a slice of that layout. So instead of the whole profile, here we have just the slice of that admin profile in this first case that relates to this field level security. And so this is going to mean quicker deployments. This should hopefully mean a lot less collisions and overwrites as well. So without getting too far, I wanted to give the audience just a little bit of an overview. Now, we're looking at a custom field, but we can imagine this same sort of view and feel with all other metadata types as well. Our flows, our Lightning pages, our Lightning web components, our Apex. So this is going to help us to just visualize first and foremost, but also help with those dependencies.
All right. I would love to dive a bit deeper into it because there's also one button I know exists, and it's the undo button. That's just after you select all these things and then you deploy it. And of course, Friday afternoon deployment, just there's no risk. Let's quickly do it. I've tried it several times myself using Gearset, and thank God there was the undo button because of course it did not go well.
Right. The famous rollback button. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry. Rollback.
Yeah. Undo, rollback. It's the same sort of idea. No, yeah. But similar feedback that we get from a lot of folks, just that ability to kind of say, oh, something went wrong. Let's go ahead and roll that back instead of manually having to go into that target org and manually delete things. So.
But from what I remember from the introduction, this is not the only way to do metadata deployments with Gearset.
You've got that right. Yeah, absolutely.
What else can you show me? Well, can you tell me to show you?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to show the audience a little bit of where it goes from here, because I think it's important to call out that compare and deploy. It's useful for a couple reasons. I mean, for our consultants that might be listening, this is very helpful when it comes to information gathering, to be able to see those differences between your client orgs. For those individual teams, this might be a little bit more of that change sets replacement, that more org to org style of doing deployments. But of course, I mentioned that large enterprise teams are also using Gearset. They're just using it in a little bit of a different way with our CI/CD pipeline tool. So I'd love to show the audience a little bit of what that looks like. And so Andre, feel free to just go over and let's take a look. So this is going to be that CI/CD pipeline. Now, just to kind of set the stage, this is our automated pipeline that leverages Git as our source of truth. Now, Git meaning GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps. It's all going to be driven with those tools that we all use as the source of truth. But in simpler terms, this is really just a series of chained together automated jobs that will help us to push metadata up to production. But as we can all see here from a little bit more of a bird's eye view, where we're seeing on the left side of our pipeline here, our development sandboxes, we got dev 1, we got dev 2. And then as we move right, we start to see some of those environments that kind of fit in between dev and production. So we've got our integration org and branch here, and then we've got that UAT branch and org combination as well. Now, diving in a little bit deeper, but not too deep, we're not going to see this totally in action today, but I will just for the audience call out some of the key features that we're going to expect here. And it starts almost kind of from the end, which is the back promotion capability. So being able to ensure that we can back promote changes to ensure that environment synchronization as we go. This is also going to help us not only identify, but also to remediate merge conflicts that might come up. We talked about that a bit ago. Hopefully with Gearset, there'll be a few less, but when there are, we need a reliable way of being able to resolve those. This is also going to come complete with quality gating type of tools. So we have reviews and approval steps that we can bake into Gearset's pipeline here. We then move over to releases. We all know that those evenings where we're doing our releases, we want a way of being able to bundle multiple features, user stories, work items into a single release entity. So Gearset helps us to do that here. And then, finally, we also have a new tool that has come under the Gearset umbrella that's called Clayton. And Clayton is really going to be intended as a code review tool. It's going to help us to identify, first of all, which parts of Salesforce well-architected framework that we care about. And then it's going to review our code with those front of mind. It's also going to, with Clayton, allow for scanning of pull requests. So at that individual feature level, but that's not it. It's going to also do full repo and org scans to help us to identify and remediate tech debt. A topic that is a little bit taboo in terms of, we all know that there's some tech debt in our orgs, but how do we get our arms around that? Clayton will help us to do that. And then I think finally, it's really just this idea of flexibility with Clayton, being able to create custom rules and custom policies so that when we have a lot of hands in our process, we can rest easy knowing that the standards that we've set are being followed verbatim. So a bit of a long-winded way of kind of introducing our pipeline here, but I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of just some of what we're going to see here with our pipeline.
Of course, in the beginning, we talked about who uses Gearset, but for this specific feature for the pipelines and Clayton, who typically uses that? Because I would assume only developers, but of course, I've mainly worked with larger teams where developers take care of it. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. And I think traditionally speaking, in software development in general, but in Salesforce, there is kind of this idea that these sorts of tools are intended only for mature developers. But Gearset decided to kind of flip that on its head and develop this pipeline where, of course, we are using a very mature process, but we're doing so from a very point and click UI that allows individual teams of, like I said earlier, 2 more point and click style admins, all the way to those larger enterprise teams that are going to have a big hand in doing developments here that have a mix of admins, of developers with 30 years of experience, developers that are fresh out of college, and the same thing on the admin side. But in addition, it's also consultancies. So we mentioned earlier really that, one of the key things with this is, first of all, for client projects, having a pipeline for each of them, helping to facilitate the project that we're working on, but also being able to leave behind a way of doing things that kind of sets those clients up for success moving forward.
For consultancies, does it also mean they can do multiple projects, multiple customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to see that drop down up there that right now just says Salesforce. I don't know if we have anything in the pipeline itself. Yeah. So we only got the one here. But it's important to know that there really isn't a limit. So we have, consultancies that are partners of Gearset that have upwards of 50, 100 projects that they're managing simultaneously. So this is one example, but we can kind of extrapolate that out further into if there were multiple going on, we'd have multiple.
Yeah, we don't really have time to go to do a walkthrough like we did with the compare and deploy. Before we go to the next screen, is there anything else to call out?
No, I think not really. I think the only thing that I wanted to just mention for the audience is that a lot of Gearset's attention has been really poured in over the last 5 years into this offering that we're seeing in front of us. And so we like to think now that we've got a product that allows teams, like I said, of all shapes and sizes, to be able to contribute to a CI/CD process, as that was our goal from the beginning. And we're very proud of what we have here with this offering. So
I assume then the next step, because you say we invested in this in the last 5 years.
yeah,
I assume the next step will have something to do with AI, because that's
yeah,
hot topic now.
of
And
course,
for everyone looking watching this video, this was recorded in February 2025. Just to know when it was, because the developments with AI goes so fast, so quick.
of course.
Where does AI come in and sort of don't really want to talk about the roadmap just yet, but
Mhm.
AI and Gearset, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right to think that it is really one of the hottest topics on the street right now, especially in the Salesforce world, with things like Agent Force and Data Cloud and some of these amazing tools and features that they're releasing as of early 2025, like you called out that we're in here. I think our stance has really been revolved around a single saying, which is DevOps for AI and not full AI for DevOps. And so what do I mean by that? We mean really our focus right now has been on building world-class, best-in-class support for customers that are diving headfirst into the agent forces, into the data clouds, into some of these more AI forward features. That's not to say by any means that Gearset does not have AI features in there. In fact, we are absolutely piloting some really cool stuff that should be coming. Early on, it's going to really lean on more of the generative AI stuff. So I think anything where, with writing or being able to summarize things like that. I don't have anything verbatim to show today for the video, Andre, but there will be plenty more to come as 2025 gets into the full swing of things.
No, that makes sense. I mean, generative AI is, of course, that's everywhere these days.
That's right.
And Agent Force really only got released 2 months ago.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'll say
Yeah,
too, I think part of the stance that we're taking is we want to take a patient and calculated approach to AI. I think right now our focus, as it always has been in our 10 years, is really about solving core problems that Salesforce development teams encounter. And if that means injecting AI into places that will solve those problems, we're not scared or we're not against doing that. But we want to make sure that we're taking a very calculated approach as to serve our clients first.
makes sense. Then share my screen again,
Sure.
because of course when we just logged in, I saw a ton of things on the left hand side of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
screen. Before we wrap up, are there any other features we would like to talk about?
Yeah, we probably won't have time to see them in detail today, but that's totally okay. We really wanted to focus on where Gearset began and where our focus has been recently. But of course, there's tons of stuff in the middle there. And so as you scroll down this menu, even just on the left side of your screen here, we start to see some buzzwords like data being thrown around. And we see our data deployment tool. It's going to help us do some of that seeding. We see data backup jobs. So Gearset's going to have a full data backup and recovery, maybe more importantly, feature there. We have the archiving, and then there's way more to come. We also see a pink highlighted feature there under what is becoming a really big focus for Gearset in 2025 and onwards, which is this idea of observability. We started with flows. We don't have an example in the actual instance here today, but there's way more to come on that. So I'm really excited for us to kind of unravel sort of this world of observability, and it's all going to be contained there.
Oh, good, because yeah, from experience, the monitoring flows or troubleshooting flows and trying to read the error messages. I'm glad there's some tools to help with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, think flooded inboxes. I'm sure we're all very familiar about when flows are failing, those inboxes, you get a lot of emails, a lot of clearing them out. And so Gearset's going to help us to visualize those errors and understand common ones so that we can actually start to get our arms around it instead of just all these errors coming into our inbox.
So indeed, also a lot of monitoring.
Yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about the future, of course, but for 2025, what
Yeah.
anything Gearset will be focusing on in particular?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's worth calling out our roadmap, and I want to say, Andre, you've got it somewhere open here. Um, I think that's the first place that I would point towards people towards our roadmap. You're going to see that as you scroll down, we're very public facing about sort of the things we're working on. And so as we look at that Q1, even we see that observability header there. That's going to be a huge, huge focus of Gearset in 2025. Like you called out, we're starting with those flows and helping to clean up some of those inboxes. We're also going to be working, as you scroll a little bit lower, on RLM. Outside of the Agentforce and Data Cloud buzz, RLM might be the next most buzz worthy feature that Salesforce is releasing. And so we are going to focus on building out and researching in this early part of 2025 what RLM is like, and then eventually build support for that. And then the final thing I would say is Agentforce. And I know I've talked about it a couple times, but we know how important this feature is for Salesforce, how important it is for the Salesforce community. And so we're going to be throwing ourselves into building that world-class support for the agents and everything Agentforce specific. Now, for those of you watching that might be going to TDX, I'm not sure if this video is going to be out by then, Andre, but if it is, look out for us there. We're going to have a lot more to share around that Agentforce support. And then the other thing that I'd call out is we set up this new thing called Gearset Insider. It is a LinkedIn Live series that we're going to start doing. And if you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll be able to kind of stay up to date on when that's coming. But the first one of those will be taking place in March. And we'd love for everyone to come along and see sort of what Gearset's looking at and working on.
Okay. For anyone who is not able to make it to TDX, how would they get in touch with you or colleagues at Gearset?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And on our website, we have a big button that's going to allow you to request a demo. So you can absolutely do that. Now, the other thing that we can do here is, I believe, Andre, you've got a QR code that will allow folks that are watching the video to get in contact with you, but also get in contact with us. So that's what I would say. It's those two methods. And then, don't be shy. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to have a more personal conversation there. So.
All right. I'll share the QR code in a second. But yeah, thank you. So unfortunately, we do have to wrap up, not to lose everyone's attention. But yeah, so what we saw today, of course, here Gearset together with ISV Forum, we saw the compare and deploy with the undo button, the rollback button.
yes.
Pipelines, the roadmap, and indeed all the AI developments that are focused for the coming time. Andrew, I would like to thank you for taking time to talk me through, show us everything.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all, Andre. And it was my pleasure to be here. And thanks for having us on. Your ISV Forum has already made a huge difference, and we're happy to be connected to it. So thank you for having us be a part of it.
Thank you for listening, watching this. Thank you for taking half an hour of your time to watch this. Of course, there will be a ton of more videos from other partners, but also definitely from Gearset, because we just heard what's coming soon. So don't forget to like and share these the videos. Subscribe to YouTube channel. This is the QR code to getting in touch with either Gearset or myself or ISV Forum or both of us. Leave your contact details there, and you'll get updates from us. Thank you.